Hey guys, what's up? It's Maddie, and today we are doing my very first book video. If you don't know me, or if you've only watched my YouTube videos before, then you might not know that reading is a very big part of my life. I wanted to share with you guys the books that I've read so far in quarantine and the ones that I have lined up for the rest of the year. So as you can see, I have a lot of books here, and we're going to be talking about all of them. Oh my god. We're going to be having a nice little chat all about books. I have a very wide range of like book interests. I either like fantasy, historical fiction, or biographies. Those are like my three genres that I like go in between. Okay, so let's start off with the ones that I've already read in quarantine. So just so you know, I'm going to be referencing my Goodreads 2020 reading challenge list so that I can jog my memory on what I've actually read, and that's what I've used to make these beautiful piles. I'm a big fan of borrowing books and lending my books out to people, so I don't have all of my books here with me right now. So for the ones that I don't have, I'm just gonna, you know, put a little picture on the screen. So let's get started. The first book that I read, which now has dust on it, awesome, is Rules of Civility by Amor Towles. I did really like this book. So this one falls into the historical fiction category, and this is all about the 1930s, the late 1930s in New York City, and it's super interesting. It took a while for me to get into the way that Towles writes, but once I did, I started really liking it. The first half was like a little slow, but it starts really picking up, and it's all about these teenagers slash people in their 20s in New York City and how their paths kind of cross, and then how they cross back again way into the future. And it's really interesting because it starts off with that snippet from the future, and then it goes back in time, and it kind of like leads you to where they end up getting to. So it's a really fun read. The next book that I read was The Age of Light by Whitney Scherer, and I also really liked this one. This is another historical fiction one, and I just have a thing for like the first 40 years of the 1900s. For some reason, I just have a huge fascination with that time period. And so this is also takes place in that time period, but it takes place in Europe and Paris, mostly in Paris, but like some other parts of Europe also. And it's about an American model slash photographer and her journey like from becoming a model into a photographer, and it's all about like femininity and girl power in a time where girl power is not really a thing. And her story is really interesting, and it's cool because it's about people that were actually historical figures, but it's obviously fiction. But it's really interesting, and I really recommend reading this book if you're into that time period. The third book that I read was Wolfpack. Wait, is that right? Was that the third? The third book that I read is one that I don't have in my physical possession right now. I think my mom is reading it or something, but it was called The Paris Seamstress by Natasha Lester. And this is another one that takes place in Paris in like the World War II era. This is also another one that kind of like fast forwards to the future and like references like future generations in 2015 versus like 1940. And this one, I think, out of the three books that I've talked about so far, has the most captivating human interest story. And I felt like I got to know the characters extremely well in this book. I love Natasha Lester's writing, and now that I'm thinking about this book again, I really need to look up if she has any other books because I love her writing. So that book is definitely towards the top of my list of favorites for this year. I love that book. It's a little long, but I think that I read it in like 2 weeks. I think it's like 500 pages, but I read it super quickly because it was just so good. So good. Okay, the next book is me delving into a genre that I don't normally read, which is like self-help books. I always like to think that I would read those kinds of books, but they're just so boring to me. It's nice hearing these like motivational words and stuff, but they just don't hold my attention as much as like a historical fiction or a fantasy book would. But this book did, because it's only like 90 pages or something. So this book is Wolfpack by Abby Wambach, who is a US soccer Olympic gold medal winner. She's amazing. This book is probably one of the most empowering books that I've ever read. I think I might reread it now that I'm looking at it again. And this was really cool because I got this book from coworkers at my office who they've been passing around this book to different women in the office, and I got past this book like right before quarantine started, so I'm the lucky one that ended up with it over lockdown. I read it in like 20 minutes and then I reread it because it was so good, and it was just, it's cool because it's like kind of created a little community in my office, and everybody like leaves a little post-it notes like with their thoughts on it, and so it just made this book extra meaningful, and I recommend it if you're interested in like pursuing any sort of like team-oriented job or hobby or anything, which is pretty much anything, then you should definitely read this book. After I read that book, then I went on a little biography binge about Queen Victoria. My boyfriend's grandmother loves Queen Victoria. She's from Germany and she grew up in the town that Victoria's husband Albert is from, so she loves Victoria. The first book that I read about her was Victoria the Queen, an intimate biography of the woman who ruled an empire by Julia Baird. And this is probably one of the more well-written biographies that I've ever read. It read less like a textbook and more like an actual story, which I personally prefer because it's a lot easier and quicker to read. So this book was fascinating. It's amazing how well Baird consolidated like 80, 90 years worth of a life lived into just like 400 or 500 pages. Like, she just did an amazing job with it. And even if you're not super interested in history, I would recommend this book. It taught me a lot about the world back then, how so much of the 1800s obviously shaped the world that we live in today, but I just had never really thought about it that much, and just how much crazy shit Queen Victoria was involved in. Like, this lady, she had her fingers in everything. Like, it's crazy. She was a very busy woman, obviously. That book was really good. And then following that, I read Victoria and Albert, A Royal Love Affair. And this book was, I think it's designed to be a companion to a TV series that was on about Victoria and Albert. And it's more of like a picture book almost, but it has a lot of cool commentary, and it's more about like the personal lives of them, which was really cool to read. So that one was really good too. But if you're only going to read one Queen Victoria book, then I definitely recommend the Victoria the Queen one by Julia Baird. Then after that, I got back on my bullshit with Park Avenue Summer by Renee Rosen, and this one, it's actually about the second half of the 1900s, so I branched out a little bit. This takes place in New York City in 1965, and it's almost like a Devil Wears Prada before Devil Wears Prada. It's really, really interesting, and it's, I keep saying everything's interesting. Let's come up with some more adjectives. This one I read at the recommendation of Katie Bellotti, who I love on YouTube. She just adored this book, so I decided to pick it up because we have similar taste in books. And it did not disappoint. It was a really fun little read for like the beginning of the summer, and I enjoyed it. This one was really fun to just like experience New York in the 60s and like working as a young woman in an industry that not a lot of women worked in back then. So it's all about working at a magazine, and I think it's based on like Cosmopolitan. Yeah, it's based on Cosmopolitan magazine and how it kind of transitioned from being a magazine by men for housewives and like what they were supposed to be, and transitioning into being a magazine run by a woman for women with actual things that are useful for being a woman. I loved this book. It was really fun. When I finished that book, I didn't really have a book like in mind ready to read right after, and I saw The Great Gatsby sitting on my bookshelf, And I was like, you know what? I haven't read that since I was like a junior in high school, so I could probably benefit from rereading it. I reread The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and it's just such a classic, and it made me want to hone my writing skills more because F. Scott Fitzgerald is just so, or was, just so talented with writing and really helping you feel the vibes of any given situation and surroundings rather than just telling you like what the setup is. Like, he really makes you feel like you're there. And I just value that so much in writing. Maybe when I'm done reading all of these books, I'll get into writing again. From there, that's when I rebounded back into my beloved genre of fantasy. And my boyfriend Ryan and I have been watching all different like movie series throughout quarantine. I was feeling particularly inspired to read The Lord of the Rings because I had never read them before, and I love Harry Potter. So growing up, I had always thought like if you like Harry Potter, then you can't like Lord of the Rings. So I never read them growing up. So I decided it was time, and I finally finished this last week. It took me forever to get through just because each sentence is so descriptive that it's like overwhelming to read more than 10 pages in any given sitting. So it took me a while to get through, but it was definitely worth it, and I really enjoyed it. I just love reading like classics that I've never read before because it gives me a better insight into like what the world was like when this was being written, like what people were reading back when J.R.R. Tolkien actually published this. It's kind of cool. We're trying to figure out what series we should do next. So if you have one that you think we should watch next, comment it below, and it better not be Star Wars. Okay, so that is everything that I've read so far, and now we're going to go into what I am currently reading, followed by what I have on my to be read list. Okay, I suppose we should start with this one. I feel bad about this book. So I started A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles, who also wrote Rules of Civility, which is the first book that I read in quarantine. And this one, so many people love this book, but I just can't get through it. I think I started this in April and I put it down in like June, and I just can't bring myself to pick it back up. So I'm stuck on page 212, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Is it worth revisiting and actually finishing, or should I just abandon it? I hardly ever leave a book unfinished. Like I even if I hate a book, I feel completely obligated to finish it. But this one, I just really can't do it. So does it get better? Let me know if you've read it. The next one, which I just started reading like last week, is City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. And I love Elizabeth Gilbert so much. She's such an inspiration for me. I saw her speak at a conference last year, and she's just amazing. Like, she has so much valuable insight and is such a well-spoken person. I love her. So I was in Target like a long time ago, and I bought this book, and I just kind of forgot that I had it. So I finally picked it up to start reading it, and I'm flying through it. I started it, I think, on Thursday, and I'm on page 342, and today is Tuesday. So I'm almost done with it, and I'm gonna be really sad when it's over. And this is also in like 1940. This book is all about a girl who grew up in upstate New York, who's kind of like the rebel of her family, and she gets, I'm not spoiling anything, by the way, this happens in like the first 10 pages. She got kicked out of college and sent back home to live with her parents, who are very upset that she got kicked out of college. And so her parents ship her off to live with her estranged aunt, who lives in New York City and runs a theater there. So it's a super fun story, and I'm back on my New York City kick again with it, and it's fantastic. I'm so excited to see where the story goes and how things end up, because things are not looking good right now for the main character. So we'll see how it goes, but I definitely recommend reading it. So those are the two books that I'm currently reading, and now we'll go into what I have on my list to read next. So of course, two on my list to be read are The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien, which is the second installment of The Lord of the Rings, and The Return of the King, which is the third installment. And technically they're not like 3 different books. They're just like part 1, part 2, part 3. So I feel weird calling it a trilogy, but it's kind of a trilogy, it's kind of not. But it is on my list to finish these before the end of the year, and I hope they go a lot faster than the first one, because then I don't know if I'll be able to finish them by the end of the year. So we shall see, but these are on my list. Another book that is on my TBR list is The Things We Cannot Say by Kelly Rimmer. And this one caught my eye because it's about World War II. That's just like my go-to time period. I just love reading books from that time period. It's like kind of messed up. It's just crazy to me that the world lived in such a disarray for like 15 years. And it honestly kind of makes me feel a little bit better about the world that we're living in right now. So hopefully this will help me take my mind off of things. And I'm really looking forward to reading this one. Finally, the last book on my TBR list is Chakra Healing by Margarita Alcantara. That's a beautiful name. My brother gave me this book because he thinks I would really like it. I don't know if he thinks that my chakras need healing, but he said that I would really enjoy this book. So that is also on my TBR list. So those are the books that I've read in quarantine so far, and the ones I'm reading currently, and the ones on my TBR list. So I love books and I love reading, and if you guys have any other ideas for book related videos that I could do, if you're interested, comment them below, because I love reading and would love to talk more about it. And my goal for the end of this year is to read 20 books. Last year I read, I think 16, so I wanted to up it a little bit. And surprisingly, quarantine hasn't made me read more than I normally would. I really thought that I would be reading a lot, but I've been reading like the normal same amount that I usually read. So hopefully I can pick it up and finish the year off strong, because I really want to get to 20 books. I'm a little behind schedule right now. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and let me know what you thought in the comments below. Make sure to comment and subscribe and like and all those things that YouTubers tell you to do. And I will talk to you guys in my next video. Bye.